Pay attention to the woman in the grey business casual blouse, the one getting out of the silver sedan. The timestamp on the security camera footage reads 3:42 p.m. on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. It is a day of unremarkable clarity, the kind of autumn afternoon that feels crisp and clean. The parking lot of the Crestwood Village shopping centre is moderately busy with the after-school pre-dinner time rush. The woman, Melinda Sanchez, has just parked her car. She turns and looks into the back seat, a warm, practiced smile on her face. Her two children, 4-year-old Leo and 2-year-old Maya, are strapped securely in their car seats. She is running a simple errand, one she has done 100 times before. A quick stop for milk and bread. She does not know it, but she has less than 2 minutes to live. This is not just the story of a shocking and senseless murder in a suburban parking lot. What you are about to witness is the final, catastrophic result of a man's hidden rage. A rage that was documented, reported, and ignored for years. It is the story of how a series of small, seemingly disconnected warnings became a trail of evidence leading to an inevitable explosion. And it is a story about the devastating failure of systems we trust to protect us from the monsters who walk among us in plain sight. Melinda Sanchez was 34 years old. To her family, she was simply Mindy, a woman whose energy seemed to have its own gravitational pull. She had grown up in the same cluster of quiet, tree-lined suburbs where she was now raising her own children. She met her husband, David, in college. He was studying to be an architect. She was in a dental hygienist program. Their friends would later recall a romance that was less a whirlwind and more like the slow, steady construction of something built to last. They married at 27, and for the next 7 years, they built a life that was, by all accounts, beautiful in its normalcy. David's career took off, allowing them to buy a small house with a big backyard. Mindy worked part-time at a local dental practice, a job she loved not for the work itself, but for the people. Her patients adored her, remembering her as the one who could calm a nervous child or coax a smile from a grumpy teenager. She had a gift for making people feel seen, for remembering the small details of their lives. But her true passion was her family. The arrival of Leo, and then Maya, refocused her world entirely. Her social media was a loving chronicle of scraped knees, finger-painting masterpieces, and sleepy bedtime stories. She was the kind of mother who organized themed birthday parties and left encouraging notes in lunchboxes that couldn't yet be read. She dreamed of one day opening a small bakery, a place where she could combine her love of creating with her gift for community. It was a soft-focused dream, something for one day, after the kids were a little older. On the day she died, Mindy was feeling the familiar pressure of a working parent. A patient had come in for an emergency root canal, pushing her schedule back by an hour. She had picked up the kids from daycare later than usual, and they were fussy and tired. As she pulled into the driveway at home, she realized they were out of milk, a minor domestic crisis when you have a 2-year-old who will accept no substitute. David was working late on a project, so she made a decision that felt utterly inconsequential. Instead of unbuckling both kids, taking them inside, and then buckling them back into the car, she would just make a quick run to the grocery store 5 minutes away. She could be in and out in 10 minutes. The kids would be fine, locked safely in the car, probably lulled to sleep by the short drive. It was a small, calculated risk, a shortcut taken by millions of parents every single day. She was a good mother having a slightly stressful day. She was a loving wife, a cherished friend, a skilled professional. She was a woman with a future filled with birthday cakes and first days of school and quiet anniversaries. And as she pulled into that parking spot at Crestwood Village, she was a target. She just didn't know it. Now, look at the man in the background of that same security footage. He is driving a dark blue, 10-year-old pickup truck. He appears to be in his early 50s, with thinning grey hair and a nondescript polo shirt. His name was Gregory Vance. On paper, Gregory Vance was a ghost. He was 52 years old, a retired mail carrier who lived alone in a small, tidy house 3 towns over. He had no criminal record. His neighbours described him to reporters as quiet, a loner, and someone who kept to himself. He mowed his lawn every Saturday morning, brought his trash cans in promptly on Tuesday evenings, and was never a problem. In the sterile language of a background check, he was clean. He was normal, wrong. Beneath that placid surface of suburban anonymity, Gregory Vance was a cauldron of resentment and paranoia. The quiet man his neighbours saw was a carefully constructed facade, a mask he wore to navigate a world he secretly despised. The truth of who he was wasn't in his tidy yard. It was in the file cabinets of his former employer, and in the dark corners of the internet. Gregory had worked for the United States Postal Service for 28 years. For the first 2 decades, his record was unremarkable. But in the last 8 years of his career, something shifted. A series of formal complaints began to accumulate in his personnel file. It started with customers. A woman on his route filed a report stating he had screamed at her for parking her car too close to her own mailbox. Another complaint came from a man who said Gregory had thrown his package onto the porch while muttering obscenities, all because the man's dog was barking behind a window. Then the complaints started coming from his co-workers. A fellow mail carrier reported that Gregory had cornered him in the break room, accusing him of intentionally taking the goods scanner. The co-worker described Gregory's eyes as wild and his voice as shaking with a rage that was terrifyingly out of proportion to the situation. Another colleague, a female supervisor, documented 3 separate incidents where Gregory had become verbally abusive after she had given him routine instructions. In one report, she wrote, "He told me that I had no right to tell him what to do. He stood over my desk and said that people like me always get what's coming to them. I was genuinely afraid." Management responded with mandatory anger management classes, which he attended without incident. They issued formal warnings, which he signed without comment. But his behaviour never truly changed. It just went underground. He became more sullen, more withdrawn at work. 2 years before the murder, he took an early retirement, citing stress. The United States Postal Service, it seemed, was relieved to see him go. The problem was solved. But the problem was not solved. It had merely been released into the world, untethered from the minimal oversight his job provided. Alone in his small house, Gregory's paranoia and rage found a new, more welcoming home: the internet. Investigators would later uncover his activity on several fringe forums, websites dedicated to airing grievances against a world that had wronged them. Under a series of anonymous usernames, Gregory Vance finally revealed his true self. His posts were a venomous tapestry of misogyny and entitlement. He wrote thousands of words about the disrespect he faced from women in his daily life: female cashiers who didn't smile at him, female drivers who stole parking spots, female professionals who spoke to him with an authority he found infuriating. He saw slights everywhere, a global conspiracy of disrespect aimed directly at him. In one chilling post, written 6 months before he met Melinda Sanchez, he wrote, "You have to be ready to stand up for yourself. The law won't help you. The cops won't help you. When someone disrespects you, you have to be the one to deliver the punishment. It is the only thing they understand." He was not just venting. He was building a philosophy. He was crafting a justification. In his mind, he was not a bitter, isolated man. He was a righteous warrior pushing back against an unjust world. And he had begun carrying a 6-inch tactical knife with him everywhere he went. He was no longer just a powder keg. He was a powder keg with a lit fuse. just waiting for a breeze. That breeze arrived at 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. The security camera footage is silent, which makes the scene all the more horrifying. It forces you to fill in the blanks, to imagine the sounds that accompany the jerky, pixelated movements. Melinda Sanchez gets out of her car. She is reaching for her purse from the passenger seat when Gregory Vance's blue truck pulls into the adjacent spot. He parks slightly askew, his front tire just over the white line. It is a minor, everyday bit of sloppy parking. Gregory gets out of his truck. He is a large man, and he slams his door with a force that visibly rocks the vehicle. He walks to the back of his truck, then stops. He turns and looks at Melinda's car. He gestures at it. From his posture, his rigid shoulders and pointed finger, it is clear he is angry. Melinda looks up, a confused expression on her face. She says something. She gestures back, a placating motion, a shrug that seems to say, "What's the problem?" This, investigators believe, was his trigger. The simple, non-deferential act of a woman questioning his authority. He stalks toward her. The distance between them closes. Melinda instinctively takes a step back, her body language shifting from confusion to alarm. Her hand goes up, a universal sign to stop. He does not stop. He is yelling now. You can see his mouth moving, his face contorted. Melinda glances back toward her car, toward her children. Her priority, in that moment of rising terror, is clear. She tries to de-escalate. She points at the space between their cars, perhaps trying to show him there is no damage, no contact. She appears to be speaking calmly, trying to inject reason into his rage. It doesn't work. He takes another step, invading her personal space, looming over her. And then it happens. His right hand, which had been at his side, flashes upward. It is a blur of motion. It is not the wild swing of a punch. It is a short, sharp, methodical movement. A stabbing motion. Once, twice, 3 times. Melinda collapses. She does not fall backward. She crumples, her body folding in on itself as if her strings have been cut. She lands on the asphalt, half hidden between her own car door and the body of the vehicle. Gregory Vance stands over her for a single, chilling second. There is no panic in his movements. There is no rush. He looks down at her, then turns. He walks back to his truck with the same deliberate pace he used to approach her. He gets in, starts the engine, and backs out of the parking spot. He does not speed away. He drives out of the parking lot at a normal speed, just another shopper on his way home. The entire interaction, from the moment he got out of his truck to the moment he drove away, lasted 47 seconds. For a few moments, the scene is deceptively still. A few cars drive past the spot, the drivers oblivious. But then a sound finally pierces the bubble of anonymity. It is the sound of a child crying. Then another joins in. Leo and Maya, who had just witnessed the unthinkable from the back seat, begin to wail. It is their cries that draw the first attention. A woman pushing a shopping cart slows down, her head cocked. She sees the empty driver's seat, the open door, and the 2 distressed children. She approaches cautiously, and then she screams. Screaming. The first 911 call came in at 3:45 p.m. The caller was hysterical, barely coherent. A woman, she's on the ground. There's blood everywhere. Her kids are in the car. The first patrol car arrived in under 3 minutes. The officers found a scene of pure chaos. A small crowd had gathered, held back by the woman who had first found Melinda. Paramedics were right behind them, but it was immediately clear that there was nothing they could do. Melinda Sanchez was pronounced dead at the scene. Her purse was still on the passenger seat. Her wallet, with cash and credit cards, was untouched. Her cell phone lay on the asphalt next to her. The initial theory of a robbery or carjacking gone wrong evaporated within minutes. This was something else. This was personal. This was rage. While one officer began cordoning off the area with yellow tape, another went to the silver sedan. He looked into the back seat, and his heart broke. Two small, tear-streaked faces stared back at him, their cries having subsided into hiccuping sobs. He spoke to them in a soft voice, but they were too young, too traumatized to respond. All they could do was point at the space beside the car, where their mother lay. The investigation began with a frustrating lack of direct witnesses. In a busy parking lot, dozens of people had been in the vicinity, but everyone was wrapped up in their own errands, their own worlds. People heard a shout, but dismissed it as a common argument. One man thought he saw two people talking animatedly, but paid it no mind. No one saw the knife. No one saw the attack. They only saw the aftermath. Detectives knew their best hope was technology. They immediately requested the surveillance footage from the grocery store's exterior cameras. The lead detective, a 20-year veteran named Frank Morrison, huddled with a technician in a cramped security office. They rewound the tape, and there it was, grainy, silent, but undeniable. "My God," the technician whispered as they watched the attack unfold. The footage was a prosecutor's dream. It captured everything: the argument, the escalation, the attack, and, most importantly, the escape. As Gregory Vance's blue truck pulled out of the spot, the camera caught a clear, unobstructed view of his rear license plate. "Run that plate," Morrison ordered. "Now." While they waited for the DMV records, Morrison watched the footage again. He wasn't just looking for evidence. He was looking for motive. He saw Melinda's placating gestures. He saw her glance back at her children. He saw her attempt to retreat. Then he watched Gregory Vance. He saw no hesitation, no remorse. He saw a man who walked with a sense of purpose, a man who looked like he was completing a task. After the stabbing, he didn't even look back. "This wasn't a fight," Morrison said to his partner. "This was an execution." The license plate came back registered to a Gregory T. Vance, with an address in the neighboring town of Maple Creek. A team of uniformed officers and 2 detectives was dispatched immediately. They were told to approach with caution. They had no idea what to expect. Would he be armed? Suicidal? Would he have fled? They arrived at the small beige house just as the sun was beginning to set. The blue pickup truck was parked in the driveway. The house was quiet. Lights were on in the living room. The officers took up tactical positions while 2 detectives approached the front door. They knocked. For a moment, there was no answer. Then they heard the sound of a lock turning. The door opened, and there he was. Gregory Vance. He was wearing a different shirt, but it was unmistakably the man from the video. He was holding a remote control. "Gregory Vance?" one detective asked. "Yes," he answered, his tone flat, slightly annoyed, as if they were interrupting his evening television. "We need to ask you a few questions. Were you at the Crestwood Village shopping centre earlier today?" Gregory's face remained a blank mask. "No," he said calmly. "I've been home all day." It was the first lie, but it would not be the last. The detectives informed him they had a warrant to search his home and vehicle, and that he needed to come with them to the station for questioning. He did not resist. He did not ask for a lawyer. He simply put down his remote, picked up his keys, and locked the door behind him, a man seemingly without a care in the world. The interrogation began at 7:15 p.m. For the first hour, Gregory Vance stuck to his story. He was home all day. He watched television. He did some yard work. He was adamant. The detectives let him talk, letting him build the architecture of his lie. Then they played the video. They set up a monitor in the corner of the small, windowless room. They didn't say a word. They just pressed play. Gregory's eyes were fixed on the screen. He watched himself get out of his truck. He watched himself confront Melinda Sanchez. He watched himself stab her, get back in his truck, and drive away. When the video ended, the room was silent. The detective, Morrison, finally spoke. "You've been home all day, Gregory?" Gregory's composure finally cracked. Not with remorse, but with indignation. He shifted his story, not to confess, but to justify. "She started it," he spat, his voice suddenly thick with venom. "She parked too close. I told her to move, and she got lippy. She was disrespectful." Disrespectful? How was she disrespectful, Gregory? Her tone, the way she looked at me. She had no right. Women like that, they think they can do whatever they want. He then concocted a desperate, transparent fantasy of self-defense. He claimed Melinda had threatened him. He said she had something shiny in her hand, and he thought it was a weapon. He claimed she lunged at him, and he had no choice but to defend himself. Morrison leaned forward. "We saw the video, Gregory. Everyone has seen the video. She never lunged. She was backing away from you. There was nothing in her hand. You know what she was doing? She was looking back at her 2 little kids in the back seat of her car." At the mention of the children, for the first time, a flicker of something crossed Gregory's face. It wasn't guilt, it was annoyance. The children were an inconvenient detail in the narrative he was trying to build, a narrative where he was the victim. While Gregory was lying in the interrogation room, the forensics team was meticulously taking his world apart. The blue pickup truck was a treasure trove. Although he had tried to clean it, a luminol spray revealed a faint trace of blood on the exterior driver's side door handle, consistent with him touching it after the attack. Inside his house, in the kitchen dishwasher, they found the murder weapon. It was a 6-inch spring-assisted tactical knife. It had been run through a wash cycle, but under a microscope, the lab found microscopic traces of blood and tissue deep within the hinge mechanism. DNA testing would later confirm it was a perfect match for Melinda Sanchez. The most damning evidence, however, was found on his computer and in a spiral notebook on his nightstand. The notebook was his journal. Page after page was filled with his cramped, angry handwriting, detailing every perceived slight he had suffered. He wrote about a cashier who gave him the wrong change, a driver who cut him off, a neighbour whose dog barked too long. He described them all with the same level of vitriol, labelling them as enemies who deserved punishment. His internet search history told the same story. He frequented forums dedicated to men's rights that were, in reality, breeding grounds for violent misogyny. He had bookmarked articles and videos about how to win a street fight and the legal justification for self-defense. In the weeks leading up to the murder, he had spent hours reading stories about women being punished for their perceived transgressions. The physical evidence proved what he did. The digital and written evidence proved why he did it. Gregory Vance was not a man who snapped. He was a man who had been planning to explode for years. Melinda Sanchez was not the cause of his rage. She was simply the one who was standing there when he finally gave himself permission to unleash it. The autopsy report was clinical and brutal. Melinda had been stabbed 7 times. The wounds were deep and clustered around her chest and abdomen, indicating a frenzied, focused attack. The medical examiner noted that 3 of the wounds would have been individually fatal. Her defensive wounds were minimal, a single, shallow cut on her left forearm, likely from raising her arm in a futile attempt to block the first blow. The evidence was clear. This was not a struggle. This was an ambush. The trial of Gregory Vance began 10 months later. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Helen Chow, built their case around a single powerful piece of evidence: the video. They played it for the jury on the first day. They played it in regular speed, and then they played it in slow motion. They wanted the jury to see every second of Melinda's final moments and every second of Gregory's cold-blooded indifference. The defense was in an impossible position. They could not deny their client was the man in the video, so they attempted to do the only thing they could. They tried to put the victim on trial. Gregory's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender, argued in his opening statement that this was a tragic case of mutual combat. He painted a picture of Gregory as a man with severe social anxiety, a man who felt persecuted by the world, and who was triggered by Melinda Sanchez's aggressive and confrontational behavior. It was a narrative that crumbled under the barest scrutiny. The prosecution systematically dismantled it, piece by piece. They called the woman who found Melinda to the stand. She testified through tears about the sound of the children crying. They called Detective Morrison, who walked the jury through the interrogation, highlighting Gregory's constantly shifting lies. They also called a former co-worker of Gregory's from the post office, a man named Robert Patterson. He testified about the incident in the break room over the scanner. "He wasn't just mad," Patterson told the jury. "He was gone. His eyes were black. I've been in bar fights. I've seen angry people. This was different. I told my supervisor that day, this guy is going to really hurt someone someday." The prosecution asked him, "Did you file a formal report?" "Yes," he said. "We all did. Several of us. Nothing ever happened." They sent him to a class, and he came back quieter, but he still had that look. We all just learned to stay away from him. The most powerful moment of the trial came when Melinda's husband, David Sanchez, took the stand. He did not speak about the crime. He spoke about his wife. He told the jury about how she would hum when she baked. He told them about her terrible singing voice and how she would sing to their children anyway. He spoke of a life that was not extraordinary to the outside world, but was everything to him. When he finished, there was not a dry eye in the courtroom, including on the faces of several jurors. Gregory Vance did not testify. He sat at the defense table day after day, with the same flat, emotionless expression he had shown the detectives on the night of his arrest. He watched the videos of his own crime, listened to the testimony about his own rage, and heard the story of the life he had destroyed, all without betraying a single flicker of remorse. In her closing argument, D.A. Chow stood before the jury and replayed the silent 47-second video one last time. "Look at him," she said, her voice low and steady. "This is not a man who is afraid. This is not a man who is defending himself. This is a predator. He saw what he believed was weakness and disrespect, and he decided, in that moment, that he had the right to be judge, jury, and executioner over a parking spot. The defense wants you to believe that Melinda Sanchez is somehow responsible for her own death," she continued, "that her tone or her look was a provocation worthy of a death sentence. That is an argument as cowardly as it is obscene. Melinda Sanchez did nothing wrong. Her only crime was to exist in the same space as a man who had been nurturing a homicidal rage for years." The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, guilty. A wave of sound washed over the courtroom. Sobs of relief from Melinda's family. A quiet nod from Detective Morrison. Gregory Vance did not react. He simply stared straight ahead as the judge set a sentencing date. He was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The story did not end there. Spurred by the testimony of Gregory's former co-workers, the Sanchez family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the United States Postal Service. Their lawsuit alleged that the USPS had been grossly negligent, that they had been aware of Gregory Vance's escalating aggression and violent threats for years, and that their failure to act, their decision to simply manage the problem until he retired, had made them complicit in Melinda's death. The case sparked a national conversation about workplace safety and the responsibility of employers to address credible threats made by their employees. It raised an uncomfortable question. How many other Gregory Vances are out there, being passed along from one system to another, their rage documented but never truly addressed? The human cost of that failure is immeasurable. 2 children will grow up with only photographs and second-hand stories of their mother. They will navigate every milestone of their lives: their first day of school, their graduation, their wedding day, with a gaping hole where a mother's love should be. A husband was left to rebuild a shattered world, to be both mother and father, to explain the inexplicable to his children when they are old enough to ask. This case serves as a horrifying cautionary tale. It is a story about the danger of dismissed anger and the dark reality of misogyny. Gregory Vance was not a monster born of a single incident. He was the product of a culture that often excuses male rage, that dismisses it as having a bad day, and that allows it to fester in the dark corners of the internet until it explodes into the real world. He saw himself as the victim, entitled to respect, and when he felt he did not receive it from a woman he deemed beneath him, he reacted with the ultimate act of ownership and control. And so, we must issue a warning to pay attention. The monster you should fear is not always a caricature lurking in the shadows. Sometimes he is the quiet neighbor, the disgruntled co-worker, the anonymous commenter online. Sometimes he is the man in the car next to you, nursing a lifetime of perceived slights, believing the world owes him something. He is a man waiting for the smallest excuse to collect on a debt that exists only in his own mind. Melinda Sanchez did not die because of a parking dispute. She died because a man decided that his momentary frustration, his wounded pride, was more important than her right to live. She died because he believed his entitlement was worth more than the lives of the 2 small children watching in horror from the back seat. That is the truth of what happened in that parking lot. It is a truth we should never, ever allow ourselves to forget.